I, like a lot of people, am sat at my computer desk almost every day. So I thought, why not make the desktop that I see every time I switch on my PC something that I'm excited to look at? In today's video, we're going to be making a fantasy themed background for a wallpaper and use the sprites that we made last week as desktop icons. Let's jump into it. Hey, my name is Jade and I like to paint with pixels. So, as I mentioned before, last week we made a bunch of sprites all around the theme of an adventuring party in a fantasy world. I wanted to expand on this idea by having a background, looking out into a vista at all the different landmarks and points of interest that they will encounter on their journey. I thought that a view from the top of the hill would be a really good setting for this background, because it gives you a lot of room to experiment with what you can see and how far you can see out into the distance. I put together a small reference board of images that I found on the site Unsplash. Once I had my reference board, I started to sketch out some ideas. For the sketches and the drawing, I'm going to be using Pixquare on my iPad. And for the canvas size, I'm going to be using 320 by 180 pixels, as this should support most screen resolutions that have a 16 by 9 aspect ratio. I found the reference board to be really useful at this stage. Not only for understanding perspective of the vista, but it also helped inspire what I should add around the points of interest. I knew that I wanted to have a city with a castle in one area, and I wanted to have a smaller town in another. And then in the far, far distance, I wanted to have a mountain range with some sort of dragon flying around the tallest peak. The references also inspired me to add natural features around the points of interest, like rivers and lakes. And I think this really helps draw the eye towards the center of the screen. So the path at the very bottom leads you over to the town, lead you over to the city, and the rivers then lead you over to the mountain range of the dragon. So it's a nice sort of zigzag pattern. I tried to make sure that I kept the important elements in the center of the screen, so that they wouldn't be cropped out when creating the different sizes for the wallpaper, or be covered with the organizers, where the icons will be put. After I was happy with the sketch, I moved on to doing a color test for the piece. I'm using the same palette that I used in last week's video when creating the sprites, so that it is all visually consistent. This is a palette that I've been using for almost all my artwork, and is something that I've sort of built up over time. I feel like this stage really helped me figure out how to make the vista feel really far away, and as if we're looking out super far into the distance. I think there were two factors that helped the most with this. The first being scale, so when an object is further away, it becomes a lot smaller. So the closer we got to the horizon line, I made certain elements like the width of the river, the buildings and trees, and also the clouds gradually get smaller. I added some foliage and rocks to show what the scale is like closer to the viewer, so they have a point of reference for all the objects that are out in the vista. The second factor was through color, and it's something that I noticed from a lot of the references that we got. For areas that are super far away, like the hills and the mountains in the distance, you can see that the further back the hill or the mountain is, the more blue it gets. And in some cases, they sort of become like layers, which felt like an easier way for me to simplify it in pixel art as well. I don't fully know the science behind it. I think it's something to do with the light passing through the atmosphere. But it was something that I noticed in my reference images and wanted to emulate here. To recreate this in my background, I had to introduce a couple new colors in between the pair of colors I already had. And a way that I found was useful to find the right color was to use the gradient tool. To do this, open up the color palette and select the first color that you want to find a new color from. Then tap the three dots and click on Generate Gradient. Tap on the second color in your pair, and it will generate a gradient of colors between the two. The count determines how many steps it takes to transition from the first color that we picked to the second color. If you want to find just the color between the two, you can set that count to 1. And if you don't want to re-add the two colors that we started with back into the palette again, make sure that this toggle, Ignore Source Colors, is switched on. Hit Add, and you'll have a new color to play around with. Throughout the color test, I was trying to make sure that I was checking my values. This helped me notice that a couple of the layers in my hills were very similar in values, so it didn't give that gradient of depth that I was going for. So I made some adjustments to the hill that was further back to make it a little darker. Once I was happy with the colours that I picked, I moved on to adding in all the details. I tried to focus a lot of the detail work in the hill that is closest to the viewer, at the bottom of the canvas. My idea is that if the terrain and features that are really far out have much less detail than the objects that are closest to us, it will help sell the idea of this being a really far vista. I feel like I'm still figuring out how I want to draw a lot of elements in backgrounds, like grass and ground textures, but this was a good chance to explore that, and I think I want to do some more smaller studies in the future to help develop this further. I really enjoyed drawing the clouds in this piece. I feel like they had a nice balance of having the cartoony, simplified style that I'm going for, but also the more realistic, wispy elements that I saw in the references. I tried to use a lot of points that I noticed earlier with adding depth to the view, by making the clouds smaller as they got further away, and making them gradually blend into the blue sky more as well. With a couple of adjustments, here is the final result. I really like how this looks all put together. I think we're especially happy with how the background turned out. It's on a bigger canvas than what I usually work on, but I think the combination of the references and the couple iterations that I did on the sketch really helped. I definitely want to make more of these in a bunch of different themes, but if you have a suggestion for a theme that you'd like to see, let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're wondering what to draw next, check out this video here, where I share 3 relaxing doodles for you to try. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care out there. Goodbye!